Hello everyone, great to have your company here on Kalkine TV. I'm Rachel and you're watching The Buzzing Trends. Firstly, the latest report by the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change paints a grim picture of the future, suggesting that the condition of global warming is worsening. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has declared the report as a code red for humanity, while indicating that soon the situation may spiral out of control. The report finds that for the current levels of carbon emissions, human activities are solely responsible. This has contributed to raising the global temperature by 1 degree Celsius since the 19th century. This increase in Earth's temperature represents the highest increase of the last 100,000 years of the planet's existence. It is to be noted that the contribution of natural hazards like volcanoes and wildfires has been insignificant to this meteoric rise in the Earth's temperature. Moving on to the role of the Paris Agreement in the fight against climate change. Now, the Paris Agreement is an international treaty that was adopted in 2015 by 196 countries to control and reduce emissions levels. The goal of the Climate Accord is to limit global warming to well below 2, but preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels. Australia, New Zealand, the US, India and several EU nations are some of the treaty signatories, working towards the goal of reducing global emission levels. The governments from these countries have identified industries such as mining, the petroleum industry, power, iron, steel and other heavy industries as big contributors to the global emission scenario. So let's look at how the steel industry is going to survive the whips of climate change. The International Energy Agency, in its report called the Iron and Steel Technology Roadmap, has laid down the impacts and a trade-off of technological choices and policy changes required by the steel industry to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. The steel industry is now facing a monumental challenge while striving to deploy new technologies and methods to reduce emissions. As the steel manufacturing industry is emission intensive and there's no immediate solution to reduce its carbon levels drastically, it's imperative for the industry to reinvent itself, bringing in changes in its production and operational activities over time for transition into a low carbon impact industry. Well, it's time for a short break now, but stay tuned. I'll be back with the crucial details for the steel industry that make
Tune in to stay updated while on the move.
We will tell you where the crypto craze has reached,
Where the property market is headed next.
what the world is doing to become more environmentally friendly.
Apart from tracking the daily market charter.
Be on top of the latest news and announcements.
With Kalkine TV.
And welcome back. You're watching The Buzzing Trends live from Kalkine TV. Now, before the break, we were looking at how the United Nations Climate Change Report may impact the steel industry. The next step that the steel industry may take is to reduce emissions on a per tonne basis. According to data available with the World Steel Association, for every tonne of steel produced in 2020, 1.85 tonnes of carbon dioxide was released into the environment. With the total steel production being 1.86 billion tonnes, it resulted in the release of 2.6 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide. Now, out of all carbon dioxide emissions resulting from human activities, the steel industry's contribution is almost 7 to 9 perfect. As the World Steel Association controls around 85% of the global steel production. Any policy shift introduced by the association would impact the majority of the industry and could help in reducing emission levels by up to 20%. We may eventually see the steel industry producing steel from scrap. With the use of each tonne of scrap by a steel plant, there's a major reduction in the consumption levels of around 1.4 tonnes of iron ore, 740 kilograms of coal and 120 kilograms of limestone. Also, recycling of 1 tonne of scrap used for steel production curtails emissions by 1.5 tonnes. According to data from the World Steel Association, almost 85% of scrap steel finds its way to steel plants for recycling. A higher recycling rate leaves very small room for further improvement. The industry needs to set a system through which every steel product at the end of its service life finds its way to the furnace for recycling. So how can the steel industry directly limit carbon emissions by reducing reliance on fossil fuels? Well, steel is produced in a blast furnace, which uses fossil fuels as reducing agents. The blast furnace has come a long way in design, efficiency, and is continuously evolving. The use of fossil fuels as a reducing agent leads to the emission of carbon dioxide. So for this reason, the steel industry must transform its reduction process, as the industry is experimenting with some breakthrough technologies. Instead of using fossil fuels as the source of carbon, the industry could use carbon sequestration for the supply of carbon. Also, instead of using carbon, the possibility of using hydrogen as a reducing agent could lead to a reduction in emissions. Well, that's all we have time for in today's show. I hope you found that informative. Stay tuned for more news and updates on Kalkine TV Live. I'm Rachel, signing off for now.